There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being left out. It comes from being let in, sitting at the same table, sharing the same last name, and still feeling like the only person in the room who's actually paying attention. If you've ever left a family dinner feeling worse than when you walked in, and you couldn't quite explain why, stay with me for the next few minutes because there's a name for what you might be carrying, and it's older than you think. And it was never really about you. Every family runs on an unspoken agreement. Nobody signs it, nobody says it out loud, but somewhere in the architecture of that household, roles get handed out like assignments at the start of a school year, and one person usually ends up holding the one nobody wants. The one who gets called dramatic for noticing what everyone else agreed not to see. The one who asks the question at dinner that makes the whole table go quiet. That person isn't broken. That person is doing something the rest of the family has collectively decided not to do. Family therapists have a term for this, and it comes out of the work of Murray Bowen, who spent decades studying how families function as entire systems rather than a collection of separate individuals. In his 1978 book on family systems theory, Bowen described what's called the identified patient, the family member who ends up carrying the label of the problem, even when the actual dysfunction belongs to the whole system. It's a strange kind of casting call. Somebody has to play the difficult one, so everyone else gets to keep believing the family is fine. Think about that for a second. A family where the parents' marriage is quietly falling apart, where nobody wants to say the word divorce out loud, will sometimes, without any conscious plan at all, start focusing every ounce of tension onto one kid's grades, or their attitude, or who they're dating. And it works in this twisted, temporary way because now the parents have something to unite over, a project, a problem to solve together. Meanwhile, the actual problem, the one between the two adults in the room, gets to sit there untouched. And here's the part that gets me every time I read through this research. It's usually not the weakest member of the family who gets cast this way. It's often the most perceptive one. The kid who felt the tension in the house before anyone said a word about it. The one who asked, "Why does it feel weird in here?" while everyone else kept pouring the coffee and pretending nothing was wrong. Sensitivity in a family that runs on silence doesn't get rewarded. It gets punished quietly, and then not. So let's talk about what that actually feels like from the inside, because I think this is where a lot of you are going to feel seen. And I don't say that lightly. You remember being the one who got blamed for the mood of the whole house? You remember apologizing for things you didn't fully understand you'd done. You got good, really good at reading a room before you even walked into it, because you learned early that peace depended on managing everyone else's reactions before they happened. That's not a personality trait. That's a survival skill you built at what, 7 years old? 8? And nobody ever thanked you for it, because nobody ever admitted that's what was happening. There's also this cruel little detail that shows up again and again in clinical accounts of this dynamic. The role isn't always permanent. Sometimes the golden child and the black sheep switch places entirely, almost overnight after some kind of rupture in the family. Somebody gets sick, somebody has a falling out, and suddenly the person who could do no wrong for 15 years becomes the one everyone's frustrated with, while the old scapegoat gets folded back in like nothing ever happened. Which tells you something important. Actually, these roles were never really about who you are as a person. They were about what the family needed a body to hold at that particular moment. I want you to picture something for a second. A family is a system, kind of like a mobile hanging over a crib. You know, the kind with all the little shapes dangling and turning. Touch one shape and every other shape moves too because they're all connected by the same wires. If one shape holds still while everything else spins, the whole thing looks broken. But it's not that shape's fault the mobile's off balance. It's just the one holding the tension, so the rest can keep spinning like nothing is wrong. Here's something worth sitting with, actually. And I mean genuinely sitting with, not just nodding along and scrolling past it. If you were the one who got labeled difficult or sensitive, or always making things about you, there's a real chance you were simply the one who refused to stop noticing. You were the person in the family who kept saying the quiet part out loud. And a family that isn't ready to hear the quiet part will always find a way to make the messenger the problem. That doesn't mean everything you did as a kid, or even as an adult, was healthy or fair to the people around you. Nobody in a dysfunctional system behaves perfectly, including the ones cast as villains. But there's a difference between owning your own actual mistakes and carrying an entire family's unspoken grief or anger or shame because it was easier to hand it to one person than sit with it as a group. If any of this landed somewhere real for you, here's what I gently ask. Try separating the role from the person. The 8-year-old who got blamed for ruining the mood wasn't ruining anything. They were reacting honestly to something everyone else had agreed to pretend wasn't there. That reaction wasn't a character flaw, it was information. And carrying information nobody else wanted to hold is exhausting. Genuinely, physically exhausting, in a way that's hard to explain to someone who's never lived it. You don't have to keep playing a part that was cast for you before you were old enough to audition for anything else. The system doesn't get to define you forever just because it needed somewhere to put its weight for a while. Now, naming the pattern is one thing. Actually untangling yourself from it on your own terms is a different job entirely, and it's one most of us were never taught how to do. That's genuinely the reason I built the Childhood Healing Workbook. It's not therapy and it's not a diagnosis. Think of it more like a mirror you can actually write in. 31 pages walking you through the patterns your childhood left behind, including the role you got handed in the family system we just talked about, so you can finally see it clearly enough to change how it runs your life today. There's a family pattern map in there specifically for untangling this exact dynamic, alongside work on emotional triggers, attachment, boundaries, and your inner child. It's grounded in real, established psychology. Bowlby, Neff, Jerkovich, Bowen, the same Bowen we just talked about, actually. And there's a link down in the description if you want to start working through it yourself. If this is you, or if it was you, tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And honestly, sometimes those comment sections end up being the realest conversations on this whole channel. One more thing before you go. There's also a link to a bundle of 7-day guides built around the stuff most people watching this kind of content are dealing with underneath all this family stuff. Resetting your dopamine, actually fixing your sleep, clearing the mental backlog. It's in the pinned comment too if you'd rather grab it from there. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on my future uploads.